Yeah.
Are we on?
I see it at the top. Now
Are you
everyone will
serious?
now everyone will start with me screaming in their ears just to really set it off right.
Yeah, there you go.
I am so stinking excited right now. I can't hardly stand it.
Well, wait, where's the chorus of dogs barking?
Exactly.
My daughter put them out on the deck because she's a good kid.
Okay.
Perfect. And there it is.
Man.
That's fantastic. We are. So
everyone will start with me screaming in their ears just to really set it off right.
Yeah.
There you go.
And it's actually
I am so stinking excited right now. I can't hardly
okay,
stand it.
Ben.
Yeah.
Where's the
You can just
chorus
close
of
that
dogs
tab. That's fine.
My daughter put them out on the deck. Okay.
barking? Okay.
You sure I didn't break it?
I'm sure it still says it's live up there. You're good.
Okay. And I just hit record to the cloud.
Great. And
Oh, I'm
locked and
so
loaded.
excited. Thank you, Ben. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood.
Is
I
it
think
readable?
The only one we're missing now is Hannah.
That is truly the only one we are now
haven't
missing.
Haven't heard from her that she's not coming, so maybe we'll
Nor
give her
have I.
a minute or so.
Okay. I am going to
Yeah, you could go ahead and
Well-
swear in the new
Yep.
the new member and alternate.
I think that's a great idea. Guys, are you ready? Mark and Greg?
So, should I have that script up that you sent?
The script, yes, the script. Okay, guys, so now my dogs are gonna bark. All right, so I'm gonna ask you to raise your right hand and to repeat after me. And then state your own names, please, for the record. And then I'll ask you to stop in the office sometime next week and sign the oath book, okay? Perfect. All right.
Are we
so
doing this
here we
separately
go.
or together?
Let's do them together.
Okay.
All right. I state your name.
I, Greg Colucci,
I, Mark Devokidis,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will
Solemnly swear.
support that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully
and I will
discharge the
faithfully
duties
discharge the duties
of the office of Village of Trumansburg Planning Board member
of the office of Village of Trumansburg
Village of
Planning
Trumansburg
Board
Planning
member
Board member,
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Congratulations and welcome to the Trumansburg Planning Board.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order, and if Hannah joins, we have a quorum, but if she joins, then we'll just bring her up to speed at that point. So I'm calling to order the meeting of the Trumansburg Planning Board, October 22, 2020. And we'll start with a roll call of the members of the board. Rick Geiger, Chair.
John Olberg,
Michelle Matrani.
Mark Devokidis,
Greg, as an alternate, go ahead, yeah.
Greg Colucci.
And Hannah Carver.
Oh, you're here, Hannah.
I'm here. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
That's okay. You have a big E on my screen.
I know.
There you are. Okay. Excellent. That's great. Well, you have the only thing you've missed so far is the swearing in of our new member and our new alternate member. So that's all set. And I've just called the meeting to order. And as you heard, we've done the roll call, including you. So we're set to go. The other person who's with us tonight at our invitation is Ben Darfler. I think everyone probably knows him, Board of Trustees. Also, for our purposes, the chair of the Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Revision Committee, which has been meeting now for some months. And so welcome, Ben. Thank you for responding positively to our invitation.
Sure.
We're delighted to have you with us. I think probably the best way to start is first of all to thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate that. But why don't you give us your take on and sort of an overview of where the committee is and how you've gotten there, and then maybe we can take it from there.
Sure. I'll try not to take too long of a time, but the committee was put together. I do know we've got a couple of folks in the room that probably aren't familiar with the whole kind of history, so I'll give a little bit of a backwards spiel. I think we started around 2 years ago at this point, at the behest of Rorden, and we started off by putting out to bid, looking for a contractor, consultant to join us in the effort, and we secured EDR out of Syracuse, I believe, to help us through the process. And from there, we established a committee that I think has been as large as maybe 8 to 10 folks. And we've had some attrition over the time, so we've dwindled a little bit smaller than that. The intent has always been to have a member of this board, the ZBA, the village board, as well as a selection of community members on that committee. Right now, we don't have a member of this board on. In the past, we had Steph Bailey as an alternate on this board in that committee. So we have been lacking in that. So I appreciate you asking me to come over and kind of give an update here in lieu of that. The committee's been working diligently across that time. We started off with some kind of background review of the existing comprehensive plan, giving feedback to EDR where we thought things had maybe already been accomplished, where things might be new concerns may have arisen in the past 10 years, kind of a high level review and outline of where we have been and what we're looking for. At the end of that, we had a public meeting for the whole community back when that was a thing we could do. So we had folks at the fire hall, gave a presentation of the new set of the vision statement and kind of a bullet point vision that we have for the new comprehensive plan, looking for feedback on that, and then asking the community to kind of go through a set of, what are the top concerns, what are important pieces that we need to make sure we're focusing on in this revision process. So we've continued through that. That also included kind of a survey or a questionnaire that was handed out both at that meeting, but also available online that people were able to fill out and send back in, and we were able to compile those notes and kind of help us put together a more detailed approach to, what do we want this to really look like and what issues do we need to address. So then over the past, that was probably about a year ago now. So over the past kind of year, we've now taken that and walked through and drafted out the 4 key sections of the comprehensive plan. Those are all basically done now. We do have 1 or 2 paragraphs outstanding that we're kind of just putting final touches on, but they're substantially done at this point. We also put together a more in-depth survey that kind of pulled a lot from a survey that was used for the previous comprehensive plan in 2008-ish timeframe. But adding a couple other questions, and we were able to pull that together and do that virtually over the, as that happened this year. And it was a good approach, something we already planned to do, but a good approach kind of in lieu of a second public meeting was to have this more in-depth community survey. So we've compiled that information, and again, looking for kind of common themes, places where we really need to focus our action items. And then at this point, we've kind of compiled all that, the current plan, existing action items we want to continue to carry forward, what we've heard from the community, what we've kind of brought to the table ourselves as a committee, and put that together in a set of goals. Each of those goals has a set of strategies underneath them and action items underneath that. And then we've identified some key action items as well there that that EDR, our consultant, will kind of drill into a bit more deeply, do some investigation around who might be best to take on that work, whether it's the village board or other boards in the village, or maybe community members, community establishments and organizations, and then where funding might possibly come for some of these projects and so forth. And so we're kind of hopefully on the end of the effort around the comprehensive plan at this point. I'd like to see us have a draft ready for review for the village board by the end of the year, I would think. The intent for that review process is then to not only have the village board look at it, but obviously get reviewed from this board and from the ZBA for input, as well as our department heads and kind of anyone else who might have some insight into those chapters. And once we have that all compiled, we'll have a broader community review. With that squared away, we'll have a formal public hearing and a seeker review, and hopefully adopt, with the intent to adopt that final project, assuming we kind of go in that direction. While that's happening, that a lot of that work is not quite on the committee. We're there to kind of facilitate that work and keep it moving, but we won't have a ton of work ourselves. We'll kind of be done with that. So we'll shift our focus pretty shortly here to zoning, which is the other large part of this effort. That's going to be led a bit more by our consultant. Where the committee will line up is giving guidance to where we've seen difficulties in the zoning previously, both from just kind of an implementation standpoint. So that's where it helps to have someone from the ZBA involved. Tom Myers, our code officer and zoning officer, is also involved. And then there's kind of like the tactical pieces that we just have structural issues with the existing law to kind of clean up. And then we also want to reflect what we're finding in the comprehensive plan into the zoning. So that would be when we talk about, we want to see more of X, Y, and Z, how does zoning shift to reflect that? So our consultant has gone through and kind of pointed out areas that they see might be places for improvement or modification. And we're going to help clarify those pieces and identify any more that might be missing. But I think leave the consultant by and large to kind of put that together in a first draft for people's review. I think Rick, maybe John were both on the original kind of zoning revision a number of years back, where we tried to kind of do this as a committee. I don't think we're going to use that style. It'll be more of a, let's get something to push against first from our consultant, and then we can kind of iterate from there, hopefully in a more expedient manner. So my hope is to see that, through a 6 to maybe 12-month process. I don't really quite know, but I think it should be much shorter. And then if we're with any luck, we might see by the end of next year, we've kind of wrapped this whole process up. So that's kind of where we're at. I should say the intent, once we get through this whole process, is to not just kind of put it on the shelf and leave it be. My hope is that we'll engage this board and possibly the ZBA, but definitely this board, in attacking some of those action items that we've found. One thing that jumps to mind, I don't know if this will be the place we'll start, but there's definitely some interest in design guidelines, if not actual requirements for Main Street per se. What should that look like? How do we want to go about that? That could be a project that this board, I think, would make sense for this board to take on, either as a board, or we could look to find funding for a consultant to work with as well. Who knows how that could be structured, but that's the kind of idea that we're looking for, is when we get to things around, planning of this village, we won't be able to get through everything we want to accomplish if it all just lands on the village board. So we want to bring in at least the planning board, if not the ZBA as well, in figuring out ways to kind of keep furthering these ideas that have been identified through this process. So I think I'll stop there, see if people have questions, want me to drill any deeper anywhere, that kind of thing.
So what are the main themes that have emerged, if you were to, just sort of summarize them in the comprehensive plan at this point?
Yeah, I think, if you look back at what we currently have in the comp plan, a lot of it is kind of an inventory, I would say, of just the current state of the village. So a lot of that is, I hate to say boilerplate, but it's important details, for someone to have in the comp plan if a developer wants to come in and understand the history or what we're trying to accomplish. What are the current issues in the village, of what I don't know, I'm losing the word, but what do we have to offer? What are the kind of benefits of the village as well? And so kind of inventorying that is a lot of what goes in. Towards the end, we start talking about where do we want to grow? What do we need to address? I would say that ranges from kind of some of the more mundane, a lot of stormwater, sidewalks and stormwater and sidewalks is a large part of that, honestly. Housing, as you might expect, is a huge one as well. And so it's trying to struggle through how do we encourage additional, incremental development in the village, while still balancing kind of the feel of the village that people truly enjoy, that we want to kind of preserve as well. So that'll be where I see zoning trying to find that balance. But that's certainly a conversation that's in there. And then looking more broadly, some of the larger concerns of our time in general around climate change and pieces like that. So how does the village slot in? How do we make an impact there? As we've continued writing up and drafting up the comp plan throughout this year, how do we deal with health and human services? How do we deal with racial issues and tensions? There's a lot that we can go through there. So we're trying to figure out how do we bring some of the more current issues in without getting too, in the weeds, I guess. You want to make this a document that fits for 10 to 20 years. So trying to find this balance of not getting too focused on any one individual specific issue, but drawing out broader themes from what's gone on in the past year or so.
I know one of the themes that has been, out there has been the issue of density, development, the density and in development and housing and just in general. Where's the plan sort of aiming when it comes to that?
Yeah, I think it's looking to how do I want to put it there? In some ways, it's strategically deferring that towards zoning conversation a little bit, but it definitely wants to figure out ways to increase density in a balanced way, right? So like that, again, that is kind of the trick. I can say for me personally, and we'll see where this actually goes, but to me, that looks like, I like to think of it as kind of take a given neighborhood that could be a street or two. Maybe I could point out one of the pieces that we did that was put out for the first public information meeting, and we got feedback from folks on, was kind of roughly shaping the village into a collection of neighborhoods. When I think people think about the village, you can start very quickly pointing to places like Larchmont and Tamarack have their own kind of feel. Washington and Congress have their own kind of feel. Wig Street has its own kind of feel. So we kind of start, sectioning up the village into these kind of character areas is what the term that EDR like to use. And within those, you get a sense of how dense or less dense is this area. And what I think I'd like to see us lean into is, in each of those areas, how do we go a little bit more dense, right? Nothing kind of drastically different, but how do we continue to just move that lever up one more notch relative to what's going on in the area? And for that reason, I suspect, and I think the plan is kind of suggesting us investigate the idea of 2 residential zones, one that would be kind of closer to Main Street, more of the historic, area of Trumansburg, not in a formal historic district sense, but just in kind of the older housing stock. And that might be actively made a little more dense than the second ring, as it were, folks that are a little bit further out away from that area, so that we can reflect that increase in density in those areas that are relative to what kind of already exists.
One question, is there any sort of interface with the town zoning efforts that are going on now?
There isn't. Yeah, that it's an unfortunate offset of times that they're just wrapping up as we're just starting. And I think we might do well to make sure that EDR is looking at the most recent zoning that I know they've adopted, and seeing if we can't make sure that we're playing together nicely on the borders. But it hasn't been very deeply kind of integrated in any way.
But they have adopted their zoning plan.
I believe so. Mark might actually know.
Yeah, it was adopted in October of 2019, and amended for the first time about a month and a half ago, through a very lengthy process by which a very minor change was made, but it took 2 months and half a dozen meetings and several public meetings to make that happen. So my advice would be, get it right the first time. I feel like the sense I'm getting after having just been on the town board for a very short time was that it was kind of a rush job at the end, and changes were made that not everybody was aware of, and there were people not happy, even as they were voting in the final version. And now there's already been an amendment, and probably there will be some others. So it's a fluid document to some extent.
Yeah, and I think there's some value in keeping it alive like that, but I think you make a good point that you don't want to do it for just minor changes, right? You want to focus it larger, because it is an effort.
My
to change.
estimation, the change that was made, it was far more time was spent for what the change actually ended up being. But
yeah.
Any other questions for Ben?
And of course, I'll add to that. The town did not update their comprehensive plan first. They just launched into the zoning. So I'm glad the village is doing it the right way.
Well, I'll be back around again, I would imagine, in a number of months to maybe kick this off for an actual review, and we have a final draft that we can all start looking at. And would again love all of your all's input into the plan itself. It'll be a little bit lengthy, probably more so than the current one, but we've tried to keep it fairly compact, and obviously with as many eyes, people can focus in on the parts that are most interesting or they have the most knowledge about, and we'll kind of get some coverage that way.
I guess I had one question. Oh,
go ahead.
My question was just, there's a lot of demographic information, as you were alluding to, kind of an inventory. Is all of that updated? Like all of those demographics, are there pieces that you left out or new pieces that you brought in?
It is. So yes, everything is updated as of, I want to say, the 2018 community survey from the Census Department. And yeah, I think we've kept a lot of the basics are still all in there. Everything that kind of the basics that are in the current comp plan have been carried forward. This is a substantial rewrite, so we haven't gone back and looked, one for one, did we kind of capture exactly the same details? You're going to see basic things around population size, school size, housing stock, that kind of stuff. And then I think we've gone and added in additional pieces as it made sense. So there's a good amount in there. I kind of want to bring up here, and I'll bring up for a real quick second for myself to remind myself kind of what are the 4 sections, because I think that might help to kind of give a sense of what we're talking about. So if I can redo this real quick, we've got, Hold on, let's see if my computer will handle opening a bunch of these enormous Word docs. Maybe while I'm doing that, John, if you had your question, we can.
Well, it actually sounds like you're headed in that direction, but I was going to ask what you're in becoming familiarized with the 2008 comprehensive plan. Do you have any comments about the strengths or weaknesses of it?
Yeah, I think the committee in general was pretty impressed with the work that was done there, especially being a very community-driven effort. I think that plan, I actually really like the plan. I think maybe the biggest critique I might have of it is this seeming lack of follow-through afterwards. And so I think we've, and I think a lot of that comes around a couple different pieces on what I'm excited to see from EDR. Some of the really tactical pieces around, naming exactly what group should probably focus on any given action item that we mark as a priority, having available like possible funding avenues. So kind of having that first directional point on any one of these projects of how do you actually get it started. And then I think the idea of being a little more discreet with the action items and having them a little more focused and clear as to what's the outcome. There's a lot of action items in the previous comp plan that were kind of hand wavy and broad and made it difficult to know, did we do that? Did we not do that? What was the intent there? So we're trying to kind of really hone in on those last pieces around the kind of tactical implementation side. I think otherwise, as far as the kind of the structure and the way it was, the content that it covered, I was rather impressed with it and thought it did a pretty good job of what it was coming out to do. Mind you, I think that was the first comprehensive plan we'd ever done as a village. So kind of coming up from nothing without any support, as it were, from a consultant. It's a pretty daunting task, as I've now seen, and pretty impressive that it got put together that way.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah.
So in terms of the action items, it just occurred to me that, do you see any of them being particularly controversial? Any of the ones you guys are targeting at this point?
I don't know. I mean, I think the most controversial ones are going to be around zoning, density, housing, the ones that we've kind of pointed out. There are a couple in there that I think, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but are in that topic that we've worded specifically to kind of draw attention to it. Insofar as like when we get to zoning, it's clear that, this was what we passed and this was the intent, and really trying to pull that out there. Other pieces we've worded more as, investigate X, Y, and Z. And so I think when we're talking about more of investigate something or consider something, there are topics that I think the village and residents have talked about wanting to look more deeply into. And so I don't think that's concerning in and of itself. But for the ones where we have a better sense of how it will likely lean with the zoning, I think we're trying to do a good job of calling that out so that it's doesn't feel like a bait and switch. Like we kind of pass something by saying we'd like to think about it, and then just kind of going in one direction without another whole cycle of kind of feedback. We've gotten a lot of feedback. And so where there is a clear sense from the community, one way or another on an item that might be controversial, but there's still a large kind of consensus in the community. We've tried to call that out so that it's kind of clear that the comprehensive plan backs that approach, and that we can bring that into zoning and execute from there.
Yeah, I think certainly our experience in the past has been that, with the comp plan, things are stated broadly, and the action items are like you said, sort of a little bit hand wavy. But where the rubber meets the road is when those start to get translated into actual pieces of the zoning ordinance. And that's where the controversy almost always seems to come from.
Yeah. Yeah. And inevitably, I think we'll have more of that in the zoning conversation. But it's a good note, and actually gets me to want to kind of review those sections one more time here, just to make sure that where we are, I would say more likely than not to go in a direction that we're kind of pointing that out so that it can be a conversation now, and rather than kind of a surprise later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can briefly just kind of review the sections. So we have kind of an introduction, which is really just the vision statement and kind of talking about what a comprehensive plan is there for. We've got a community profile. That's more of the kind of demographics. What are the natural resources we have around? What are the conditions here? Kind of, all the facts and figures, as it were. Then we talk about kind of issues and opportunities around many of those same areas. So, housing might be one, parks and recreation might be one. So that's where we start to kind of talk about, right, what's going forward, where do we want to see these things evolve? And then the final section is those more detailed, granular action items. So that's kind of the structure of the whole plan. And I think we've tried to do a pretty good job of balancing. The second two parts are where we really kind of got into as a community and a committee to talk about, okay, we know where we are. That's kind of boilerplate work, where we want to go with that. So talking about things like larger goals around energy and sustainability, trying to align with the county's carbon neutral by 2040 plan and some of these other larger initiatives. Talking about where do we want additional recreation, park opportunities, walk paths, bike paths, that kind of thing. So that's where we all kind of talk more broadly about generally what we'd like to see, but I think it's still kind of fluffy at that point to some degree. And then that's the implementation details is where we kind of try and get real granular about options and ideas.
Do you think it'll be, when it's all done, you think it'll be a consensus recommendation to the trustees?
From the committee?
Committee, yeah.
I do think so. Unfortunately, part of the kind of waning of folks' interest and focus on the committee has left us with more alignment as far as people's perspectives on where we should go with the comprehensive plan. We've striven to bring in additional voices, but folks who have, and we initially set up the committee to have a very broad focus of different opinions across the community. And just as it's happened over time, kind of more of the diversity has left the room. So we're kind of left with folks that I think are generally aligned on the vision there. So I think, yes, with the current group that we have, it'll be pretty straightforward.
John.
Yeah, John.
Just one thing, I think that it's going to be pretty tricky moving it into the zoning bylaw. I found from my personal experience with the Crescent Way project and trying to sort things out, that the comprehensive plan was very helpful to me, whereas the zoning bylaw was very difficult to work with. So I think that's where the challenge is going to come.
Yeah. Could you say more about that? I'm not quite sure I follow exactly.
Well, I feel as though the comprehensive plan is almost written like the Constitution. It's the broad picture and here's where we want to go. Whereas the zoning bylaw is, if X is 30 feet, it's too far. It gets so specific that it's difficult to interpret the whys and wherefores. It's also the zoning bylaw that we have. It's mixed up with multiple references, for one thing, and the index and the way to handle to access it is very awkward. especially for people who are coming into it from the public.
Yeah, it's the zoning approach is going to be a bit different. Like I said, it's not going to be kind of a full, I think I said this, they're not going to be attempting to do a full rewrite of the law, but in the way that we have done pretty much a full rewrite of the comprehensive plan. So I think structurally we'll have a difficult time really kind of ripping it apart and reworking it, maybe to the level that I think would be ideal. But the hope is that at the very least, things where there's unclear definitions, part of it's definitely going to be an explicit glossary. I think we already have one, but I think it needs a lot of revision. EDR has already given us a draft suggestion of glossary improvements. So we're definitely going to try and focus on a lot of the details we've heard from that process from Tom Myers as well, where things get hard to interpret, aren't clear enough, where we've had, the village has ended up in court in the past with a landowner over something and possibly lost that case because it's just too unclear to kind of enforce. So we're looking for those types of opportunities, as well as some of the broader changes I was talking about, maybe a second a residential zone, some of those pieces but I think it's the way I think we'll see it unfurl is more of a set of basically edits to the existing document, trying to keep it easy to see how we started in one place and went to the next place. And my understanding is that's an easier approach from a legal perspective to kind of track those changes and see how things evolve. So that's kind of the approach that our consultant has laid out for us. So I think there was an interest in possibly, again, starting fresh, because we've all seen how there's a lot of room for improvement there. But I think we're going to have to take kind of a halfway, I don't want to say a halfway measure, but we'll take a path that kind of gets us there in more incremental steps. And, maybe we'll find ourselves revisiting zoning again every couple of years as we learn and we try and improve. But I think we'll do it more iteratively in that approach rather than kind of a full rip and replace.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Ben.
Absolutely.
It was very, very helpful. And, I'm glad we had a chance to catch up a little bit. Hopefully, at some point in the not too distant future, we'll be able to have in-person meetings and, do things that way. But
yeah,
thank you very much for making the time.
Absolutely. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, Ben. Thank you.
Okay, so the next items on the agenda are any old business. No one has brought anything to my attention, so I don't expect that there is anything. Okay, how about new business? Tammy.
So your next two meetings are scheduled on Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve. So we're going to, So, what do you want to do? Do you want to send out a doodle for alternate dates? You tell me what you would like and I'll make it happen.
I vote for turkey.
Second.
No,
So
okay.
we're going to skip. So do you want to skip November?
Yeah, the only thing would be is if something comes up that's of sufficient importance that we would need to meet. But we can schedule a different date if that were to happen. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I know of nothing that's on on a plate. I ran into Tom the other day and asked him whether there's anything that might be coming our way, and he said, amazingly enough, no. So
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so unless you hear differently, we will not meet in November, and then I'll send an email out and we'll see what December brings.
Sounds good. Let's see. When is the 90-day extension that we gave on Crescent Way? That comes due when? Is that that would be? We did that. We just did that. right?
Yeah,
So
we just did it
that's not,
September 28th.
that's not until 2021. Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, after the first of the year.
Okay.
All right. Okay, well then, happy Thanksgiving.
All right. Is there a motion
All right.
to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
I
Hi.
miss
All right.
you, Tammy.
I missed all of your shiny faces. As you can see, I worked remotely today. I'm doing 9th grade algebra.
Oh.
Great.
Not any better this time around.
All right. And welcome again to our new members. It's great to have you with
Yes.
us. Thank you.
It is.
All right. That's it for
Thanks to
tonight.
the full board.
All right.
Have a
Thank you.
great night, everyone.